Sanibonani. That is Zulu for hello. Sanibonani simply means I see you. If you remember the movie Avatar, those little or those tall aliens, when they greeted one another, they would just say to each other, I see you. That is actually taken from the Zulu greeting, one of our 11 official languages. It is probably the easiest language in the world. You say la, it means here. You say la la, it means sleep. La la la, sleep here. La le la, listen. La le la la, listen here. La le la le, sleep over there. That's just all you need to know. And if somebody speaks to you in Zulu and says sawubona, how you respond is you say yebo. And that simply means yes. If you say it after me, sawubona, and you respond by saying yebo. Some other people, if something is very good or something is, you agree on something, you said yebo, yes at the same time. Okay? You say yebo, yes, when you agree on something that is, you totally agree with somebody on something.
On the highway, 108 to Soweto. This is the N1 highway that links Cape Town all the way up, right through South Africa on a north-south direction, up to Beitbridge, which goes into Zimbabwe. But around Johannesburg, it's a ring road, obviously to avoid congestion in the cities. And we're off to Soweto, which is an acronym for Southwestern Townships. So if you look at a map of Johannesburg, you will see at approximately 7 or 8 o'clock on a clock, which is in the southwesterly direction, off ramps for Soweto, and that's our route at the moment. Alright, so in the distance, we're approaching the Soweto district, and a key characteristic of Soweto is the mine dumps. Obviously, Johannesburg and ultimately South Africa was built on the back of its mineral wealth, and key amongst that was gold. And for a large part of the 1980s, South Africa was one of the world's largest producers of gold. And what we'll see coming up is remnants of that, and in the distance you'll see mine dumps. Mine dumps are quite literally mounds of slurry that has been dredged up and used in the process of gold production. And it is, as mentioned, a characteristic of Soweto. There's been a lot of effort recently to rehabilitate the mines. There's been toxic chemicals associated with gold production, and with today's day and age, there's a big emphasis on redressing the issues that have happened to the ecosystem as well, not to mention the health risk that toxic sludge poses in built up areas. Here we are leaving the highway off to Soweto. Soweto also hosted the 2010 Soccer World Cup. It was a massive global event. It was a very well run event, and the final was played here in Soweto. We're going to turn right over the highway and we'll get a good glimpse of some of the mine dumps that characterize Soweto. these mine dumps are quite literally mini mountains. And there is still gold in those mountains, obviously a very small amount, and as the gold price fluctuates, determines the price of the technologies used to extract the gold. It's very, very expensive to extract gold, obviously, and the deeper you go, the more expensive it is. South Africa still boasts some of the deepest mines in the world. Some of the mines at the western deep levels are in excess of 3 kilometers, almost 2 miles, possibly even more deep. The type of housing that you'll find in Soweto is very modest buildings for the most part, in high density areas. What we'll see today is an evolution of forced separation. The apartheid government in South Africa implemented various measures to separate races of different color, cultures and ethnicities, and in many instances the housing was modest, to say the least. But Soweto built its own critical mass over time and has evolved into a bustling and busy and important city. It's by no means where it needs to be as a city, but there is some wealth in Soweto now, but without doubt the main economic classification is in a developing state. Just over this traffic circle is one of the most famous football stadiums in the country. It belongs to the Orlando Pirates football club. Football or soccer is a hugely popular sport in South Africa, and this is a little bit like the Los Angeles Lakers of soccer. So it's one of the premier clubs in the country, and Soweto actually possesses two of the most famous clubs. One is Orlando Pirates and the other is Kaizer Chiefs.
Here we are now in Soweto, and I just wanted to give you just a bit of general info. Obviously we're going to be spending the whole day guiding in Soweto, so we're going to see lots of things, we're going to experience lots of what I'm about to just contextualize for you now. And you're going to hear a lot about apartheid and Soweto and the beginning of Soweto itself. So just to very quickly contextualize what this is all about, Soweto, where we are now, is what they class as a township. Now, back in 1947 or 48, the South African government, the white South African government, implemented a terrible policy called apartheid. You've probably heard of it, but for those of you that haven't, apartheid was the government's way of segregating South Africa based on race. They didn't want black people living amongst white people, vice versa. So what they did was they allocated certain areas where only black people would live. And they then classed those areas as townships. And Soweto is an acronym for Southwestern Township. And it was built in this, or it was put in this location because of the mine dumps. It was actually quite a toxic, nasty, barren area where those slag heaps that we saw earlier on our way in, the slurry mountains that were left over from the gold mining, created this nasty, toxic, terrible dust in this area. And basically the white government didn't want any white people living here, and so they figured that this would be a great place to put all of the black people. And so Southwestern Township, or Soweto, was born. Yeah, so today Soweto is this extraordinary place with this amazing history. Soweto is the place where a lot of the uprisings started. You're going to hear a lot about this today as we walk around, as we experience Soweto. So I love being in Soweto, and I think you guys will hopefully see a little bit of why that is today, because it has this amazing history. It has these incredible fights and wars that were started in Soweto to fight the oppression that was being forced upon them. And today, for me, walking around Soweto, it's a real thing of hope. Because you see a lot of bad rap in the news about South Africa and its current state of affairs. You'll see a lot about the high crime stats in the country. You'll see a lot about corruption and all the nasty things, and these are real problems in South Africa. However, when you walk around Soweto, you're filled with this hope again, because 20, 30 years ago, I would not have been able to stand where I am right now. I would not have been able to walk around Soweto. The tensions between the race was very, very high, and it would have been too dangerous for me as a white person to come into Soweto. And yet 20 years later, here we are, we're walking around freely. And for me, that is such a huge accomplishment in actually such a short amount of time. So let's go check it out. Let's see what it's all about, and let's learn a bit about the history.
My name is Bongani Ndlovu. I am a Gauteng qualified guide. I will be taking you on a tour of Soweto today. I am 39 years old, and I was born and bred in Soweto. So I guess it's a perfect place or a perfect person to be able to host you all throughout on this journey. We will be going on a bicycle tour, a bicycle excursion, covering a few parts of Soweto, a few areas of Soweto. We will cover everything from some of the most developed to some of the less or more impoverished parts of Soweto. We would like to take you on this journey so that you can experience the vibe of Soweto. Even though this is unusual times, but Soweto is still alive. People are still out there. People are still trying to make a living. People are still trying to go on with their lives and trying to get their day-to-day runnings in place. So we will take you on this journey for the next few hours and show you every part of Soweto, from as we said, from the most developed to some of the lesser areas of it. Welcome to the heartbeat of South Africa, the heart and soul of South Africa, Soweto, where it all began. The southwestern townships, the heartbeat of South Africa, an area with such a rich history where a lot of our influential politicians, business people, and about 4 million South Africans live. Soweto. We say that when this place sneezes, the whole country catches a cold, and that's how much influence Soweto has on the entire country, maybe even the continent. So much has come out of this place, great music, great leaders, and amazingly also very amazing sporting teams. Assistant yakho ntana yami, khuleka.
Good morning and welcome
Wait.
to Soweto. I chose this spot so that we can have a beautiful view of Soweto. What we're seeing right now is just a small portion of what is known as the southern and western townships. And yes, of course, Soweto, it is made up of 41 townships, but right where we are in the heart of Soweto, which is also known as Orlando West. And yes, of course, if we stretch our eyes further, on our right hand side, we have these beautiful mine dumps. From years and years of digging gold, depositing soil, layer by layer, today it gave us that structure. Today they stand as testimony to the famous 1886 gold rush, which attracted all nations from all over the world, and they all came flocking to these parts in search for riches. And yes, of course, with a lot of nations and a lot of people in one area, we had a problem of rats in the area. And then, of course, in 1904, a disease broke out known as the bubonic plague. Now, later, the bubonic plague would be renamed to the Black Disease, which now would be used as an excuse to relocate the natives from the city center and placing them to the southern western townships. To the right-hand side of the Green Hill, it is an area known as Klipspruit or Pimville. In 1903, that would be where the first natives would be placed. And yes, of course, with the breaking out of the bubonic plague, more people would be placed in the area. Right next to Klipspruit used to be a sewage farm. And yes, of course, the sewage farm, it had a very huge impact on a lot of lives of children. Each and every year, over 100 kids would lose their lives. That's when the mayor of Johannesburg, by the name of Edwin Orlando Lekay, paid the area a visit. He was not happy of the conditions. And this, of course, in 1930, the first brick houses would be laid. So if we stretch our eyes between the two cooling towers and the great structure, which is the stadium, the houses in between, they will be built in 1930. And yes, of course, with the help of a mayor of Johannesburg by the name of Edwin Orlando Lekay. A great story, in 1935, a gentleman known as James Sofasonke Mpanza went to reside in Orlando, became more active in politics, and yes, of course, the primary concern was housing, as the number of people and the number of houses which were placed in Orlando didn't really correlate. And yes, of course, in 1945, on the 25th of March, they invaded municipal land. If we stretch our eyes on the red roofs, which is Orlando West, in 1945, on the 25th of March, they invaded municipal land, and this, of course, erecting over 4,000 shacks and registering each and every one of them. Later, Sir Ernest of the Open Hammer made funds available for the second brick houses to be laid, which forming Orlando West. So yes, of course, it is one township known as Orlando, mostly separated by what's close to our hearts. As South Africans, we never used to participate in other sports. We only participated in soccer. And then we took soccer and placed it right next to our hearts. Orlando East, it gave birth to one of Africa's giants, which is Orlando Pirates. And then Orlando West also gave birth to another African giant, which is Kaizer Chiefs. Both teams, when they play together, it is the 6th most watched match in the whole world. It is known as the Soweto Derby. And yes, of course, Soweto really gets happy during that period. Yes, of course, Soweto has a land space of 200 square kilometers and still growing. And yes, of course, with each and every square kilometer, we have over 6,000 people with 11 languages. But of course, understanding that Soweto is not only home to South Africans, it is home to a variety of people from all over Africa. So our population, it is estimated to be plus minus 3.5 million people that say this is our home. So we're going to be moving to different locations, sharing different stories. Right now, I just want us to understand that different townships were built in different eras by different rulers or colonialists. And yes, of course, if we see the tin roofs, that means those houses will be built before 1948. before the apartheid regime. And this, of course, if we see asbestos roof, which is a very harmful material, but if we see houses which are having asbestos roof, we normally understand that those houses will be built after 1948. So yes, of course, we're going to be moving to a much more disadvantaged area where we're going to share more about the lives of miners. And we're going to share more about a beautiful song which is sang by the whole world, composed by a gentleman known as Solomon Popoli Linda. And yes, of course, unfortunately, he died a poor man, not receiving royalties of the song. But the song, it is sang all over the world. A good story about the song: in the early 2000s, the 3 daughters of the late Solomon Popoli were found. And yes, of course, compensated with over 160 million. Not sure of the currency, but I'm hoping it's in pounds. But yes, of course, not to waste any more time on our introduction, we can just hop back to our 2-wheel Ferraris and our 3-wheel Ferraris, and we head to our second stop where we're going to share more about the miners.
What about it?
So yes, welcome to Mzimhlophe Former Men's Hostel. In 1948, the apartheid government won the general elections. Over 160 laws which racially classified and segregated people were imposed to the natives. You were not only separated from the color of your skin, nor the language. It got so far that even gender would be separated. Right behind me, it's single gender, used to be single gender accommodations. 16 men would be placed in one house. 8 men for the day shift, 8 men for the night shift. Understanding that this is only a 2-room. Each and every door only has 2 rooms. In the front, it's the kitchen. At the back, it's the sleeping room. The sleeping arrangements, they would sleep in concrete bunker beds, where 4 would be placed on one side and 4 would be placed on the other side. Sleeping on concrete. You might hurt your hip bone if you sleep on the side. You might hurt your chest if you sleep with your chest. You can only accommodate it with your back. But understanding that right on top of you it's asbestos, whereby inhaling those particles that come from it might lead to lung diseases, tuberculosis. We move from the houses, we go to where the miners used to work in the mines. We speak about the technology. We speak about silicosis, which was a problem back then, and it is still a problem today. But one beautiful thing that came from these sad places was a song known as Imbube. Imbube means the beast or the lion. So when the mine workers were working together under those harsh conditions, what would keep them going would be a song. Today the song is sang by the whole world, even translated to different languages. Some of us, we even learned how to sing it in French. But yes, of course, the song, it is also known as The Lion Sleeps Tonight, composed by a gentleman known as Solomon Popoli Linda in 1942. Unfortunately, in 62, he died a poor man. And yes, of course, but the song lived with us, and today it is still part of us. Reason why the area is still like this. We have two versions of the book. We have a version that says, oh, I have made it. I have came out of poverty. I have went to school. I'm working a great job. And we have another page that says, I'm still a victim of the 500 years of conditioning. Or I'm still stuck in the 40s. Or I'm still in the 60s. After the 26 years of democracy, places like these still bear the scars of apartheid. Some people might come out and say apartheid is over. Some of us might come out and say it has shifted its face. It went from being physical and aggressive to more economic. In 1994, when Nelson Mandela became president, he introduced the project known as the Reconstruction Development Project, which gave and promised houses to a number of people. I'd like to touch a bit on the wars, the South African wars, but specifically the Transvaal War, which was the war between the hostel dwellers and the township dwellers. Now understand that it was more tribal, it had to do with tribes. But now the people in the hostels, they've been placed here for a very long time. And they don't know what's happening on the other side. Now the government of the time would send people to wear ANC t-shirts, white officials, and paint their faces black, even their hands. And then they would come to the hostels and randomly shoot people. And later that would be blamed to the ANC. Understanding that the hostels are traditionally rooted to their traditional party, which is the IFP, which is led by Mangosuthu Buthelezi, was and still. And on the other side, in the townships, we have the ANC, which was led by Nelson Mandela. Now in 1991, when my grandmother was walking from Orlando East coming towards Orlando West, she witnessed an exchange. Now, she saw white officials with the hostel dwellers. So, to differentiate the two, the other one you can see with the color of the skin, the other one you can see with red bandanas on their heads. So the IFP would wear red bandanas as sign of their traditional party. Now what she saw was cases of arms being handed over to the people of the IFP. And yes, of course, she would run to the townships and alert the people that she had seen that the officials have been giving the hostel dwellers guns and machetes to go fight the township dwellers. 1991, the war broke loose. All the way to 1993, over 600 people lost their lives right here in Orlando West. So understanding that all over South Africa, where there's a township, right next to a township, there's a hostel. So these wars never took place only in Soweto, but they took place all over South Africa. Over 60,000 people lost their lives during that period of 1991 all the way to 1993. We come back to these areas, we have our kids growing up here, thinking that this is a right lifestyle, this is a right way to grow up. But when we see that, we understand that this is a bad condition that we are putting our kids on. We see the contrast from the other side of the township coming this side. So when development takes place on the other side, it doesn't always trickle down to these places. We're speaking as we cycled and took through the hostels. There's a number of streams, and that would be created by the hostel dwellers so that water don't get stuck in one area, so that it doesn't pose any harm to the little ones. Streets still use communal toilets and communal taps. when I heard that a hostel is actually a youth hotel, I was very disappointed. Because what I see here, it's not a hostel. It's a concentration camp where people still use the bucket system to get water for food, for bathing, for any other needy things. We're going to move to this spot, to a spot where we can explain more about why we still have our families in such conditions. Houses with no drainage system, with no bathrooms, with no water. And why this area has no schools. Why it has no kindergartens. We're going to share most of those when we reach our next stop.
Sure.
Speaking about development, in 2007, a soccer field was removed. I was very disappointed. But when I saw houses, it brought hope. In 2010, these houses, they were all looking beautiful and ready for people to move in. People started grabbing their belongings, saying, finally, something with dignity. As they would come in trying to move in, they were stopped. Because now people are coming in with the mentality that these houses are part of the Nelson Mandela RDP. Now, in 2010, we were hosting the FIFA World Cup. By that time, people were told that we are still in a very busy period. Let us wait for the World Cup, and then we can sort out the issue of houses. After the World Cup, and yes, of course, people came back, grabbing their belongings again. And now they are stopped in a different way, being told that these houses belong to the private sector. It's not the so-called Nelson Mandela RDP. Now people are being expected to pay rent, which is estimated to be around 950 to 1,000 rands. It's a two-bedroom house, a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, hot and cold water. It's all you need if you're from the other side. But unfortunately, not everyone can afford to rent. As before we were hit by the pandemic, our unemployment rate was standing at 36. With COVID, it rose up. But now These houses, today it's 2020, still standing empty. When people ask why we are not placed inside, they don't get answers. Hostels still have chiefs. They're still led by chiefs. But when it comes to the addressing of houses, I don't think chiefs represent their people very well. If you wake up that side every day, and this is what you see every day, you can assume what kind of a person you are becoming each and every day when you see this. Of course, people do get frustrated, they grab stones, break windows and doors. But that doesn't change a thing, because they always come back and fix them, and even hire people to clean. For 10 years, well maintained. They even hired a security company to make sure that nobody squatters. I ended up asking myself a question that, is there really a private sector involved? Or is the government using our tax money to humiliate us? Because understanding that if it had a private sector involved, it would already be generating revenue. But for 10 years, these have been empty. Of course, there are people who want to move in. But if you move in, you are enemy of the cause. Because now it's either all in or no one. It is said that before it gets better, it gets worse. After the so-called 26 years of democracy, the stories are still not the same. We're going to move to a different stop where we're going to share more about the youth of 1976, which had a very huge impact on the kind of a life that we have today. They also had clashes with the hostel dwellers, because now school kids understood things in an academic way. They saw it differently. At some point, when school kids would protest, hostel dwellers would question that. And at the end of the day, someone might even get hurt.
How far is your place from here?
My place.
Yeah. Like, where did you grow up in this area, or how far is from here?
Where I grew up, 10 minutes probably.
10 minutes. Okay.
Drive.
What was it like growing up here?
Oh man, a lot more different
Yeah.
than time I spent elsewhere, like maybe in the suburbs of Johannesburg. It's a lot different.
Okay.
There's it's different cultures of people all mixed together.
Yeah.
With I think with less opportunities,
Yeah.
and that always makes things a lot more interesting because people are always trying to survive. They're trying to earn a living,
Yeah.
and without the knowledge and the resources of it,
Yeah. Is there lots of like migrants here?
there's always been.
And how does that work in terms? Is there a lot of xenophobia, or how does that work with the locals?
I think there's always been a lot more tolerance rather than conflict. But the one thing that always makes things worse is the fact that when you have so many people trying to share a little bit or trying to share some small opportunities, and everybody's trying to get a piece of that pie, it becomes impossible.
Yeah.
Because there isn't much. The pie is too small to go around to everybody.
Yeah.
So that creates conflicts in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And with the culture of South Africa, in reality, is the fact that when a lot of people feel that they contributed or they compromised, maybe even their parents contributed to getting the country to be where it is. So in direct relations, they feel that they should be the ones who are direct beneficiaries of democracy and freedom.
Yeah.
Riding with Tola.
I guess so.